I've talked a lot about heavy metals in past episodes and have spoken with some of the top detox experts in the field, except for one, which is my guest today. Dr. Chris Shade is a world renowned expert on all things detoxification, especially heavy metal chelation. If you've been listening to me now for a while, you know that I've been going down the rabbit hole, all the rabbit holes on heavy metal detoxification. And I have tried multiple different protocols, not with great success, and have had some pretty severe reactions from heavy metal detoxification, including starting to lose my eyesight, which was really scary. And it really scared me off of heavy metal chelation for a long time. Well, I am ready to get back up on that horse because I am going to embark on the Quicksilver Scientific heavy metal chelation protocol because I have heard so many good things about it. And it seems to be one of the only ones that I think really puts safety first because heavy metal chelation can be extremely dangerous. And they just seem to be doing it right. Dr. Shade seems to be doing it right. So today I get to interview Dr. Chris Shade about all things heavy metals and how to do this properly so that you guys know, because you keep asking me, everybody in my membership groups, I get people emailing me saying, how do I do this, Karen? And I never have a straight answer because I have yet to find a good protocol. So I've got lots riding on this.
Yep.
uh, so the pressure's on, Dr. Shade. But Chris,
I'm not
you have
afraid.
I know you're not afraid. It's great. You are the CEO of the Quicksilver Scientific, and you are a driving force of development and innovation. You have a vast depth and breadth of knowledge, passion for healing, and intuitive understanding of chemistry and biology. And those are reflected in Quicksilver Scientific's well-designed detoxification protocols, unique supplement delivery systems, and patented mercury speciation test. So welcome to the show. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Sorry, lost connection there.
Lost connection. We're
And
good.
there we
So
go.
welcome. If you didn't hear that, welcome to the show.
Yeah, you're the CEO of going.
Oh, well, I gave you a nice intro. Everybody
Right.
knows who you are. So
Good.
happy to have you here to talk all things heavy metal chelation and
Yeah.
hormones.
Heavy metal and hormone.
Yeah, I know because you guys just came out. We were just talking about this beforehand. You guys just came out with your own line of hormones, which
Yeah.
I would love to know what made you go down that area. Like, do you see a lot of stuff with hormones with the heavy metals or in detoxification and just thought this has to be part of this?
I'm 55 and all the women around me were descending into the spiral of perimenopause, and I had to interject into that and set their brains back on. So there's always a reason. I got interested in hormones at least 10 years ago. And I was working with a guy then, Mark Gordon, who's a big hormone guy at A4M. And he taught me a lot of early hormone stuff. And he urged me to make a liposomal testosterone, which I found you can't make a liposomal testosterone, but I could make this other nanoparticles. So I figured that out. Then I started making some things with DHEA and pregnenolone. And then I was like, well, I can totally solve the female hormone thing because women, when you give them nanoparticle DHEA, it goes right into testosterone. And so you have all the androgens taken care of. And then with cosmetic laws, you can put enough progesterone and estrogen into these topicals to make them actually work for the body. And so I just made a whole line. And and it really literally was true. All these women around me are going into menopause, and I got 100 employees, and a lot of them are 50-year-old women. And, there was my wife at the time. And so, and then my girlfriend, and then like everybody was at the same age, and so I just started treating them all. And then my right hand woman in the company, and my HR manager, like everybody, just had them all, and got to dial it all in with them, and it worked spectacularly. And so then we got patents around everything, and then we launched the whole line, and it was like, oh wow, it's really amazing. We can give people full access to this.
Yes.
And it's so hard sometimes to access the tools that you need. And oh, I got to go to a compounding pharmacy, or I got to use this prescription stuff. It's like, yeah, now here's a supplement that'll do it.
Yeah, it is a really great thing to be able to offer. And I, as I was telling you before, like I just came out with my own line for the very similar reasons, which was
Yeah,
that it just for some people it wasn't accessible, or the stuff that they were getting at pharmacies is not super clean a lot of the time.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
know that yours is, and I've used yours and it's been great, and they're really absorbable and they go really nicely
yeah,
on the skin. So I just appreciate that there's another line out there that is
yeah.
trusted and that I can refer to if need be. So I
Yeah,
think it's
it's
great.
got the estradiol, estriol, progesterone, DHA, pregnenolone, different adaptogens that are a part of the whole system, and it works real well. But you were asking, are you seeing a lot of hormone stuff with the heavy metal
Mhm.
stuff? Well, yeah, I mean, I always was, because I tended to get so many people who came to me in perimenopause with suddenly having metal toxicity symptoms, when
Mhm.
they had their amalgams for the past 20, 30 years, and all of a sudden they're amalgam toxic, or this toxic, that toxic. So why is that?
Mhm.
And a lot of that is because when we start talking about detoxification, there's various triggers inside the body that turn up your internal chelation system, your internal detoxification system. One of them is called the biggest one is called NRF2. Well, it turns out that they have certain code triggers, other things that have to be active for them to work. One of them is the PXR, the pregnane X receptor, which responds to pregnenolone and progesterone. So as those go down, your ability to activate NRF2 and detoxify and keep your cells clean goes down. And as progesterone goes down, you're in that perimenopause. Your estrogen hasn't come down yet, but your progesterone has. So that's screwing you up, because that's putting you more into a sympathetic dominance rather than parasympathetic, where the progesterone calms things down and makes you more parasympathetic, which helps detox. Sympathetic kind of shuts it down. Also, estrogen shuts down bile flow. It's just part of this sympathetic activity that it has. It locks up bile flow, puts you more into a fight or flight. And that bile flow is what's taking the toxins and including the metals out and putting them into the GI tract. Whereas progesterone opens up that bile flow. So there's all these ways that when the hormones are going down, it's shifting the way that the body deals with these chemical stressors, and it's making it less apt to be able to deal with them. So they're building up and they're showing their toxicity where they weren't showing it before.
Wow, I didn't know that. And what about what don't you think too that because as we start losing the progesterone, testosterone, and estrogen, all three of them impact our bone health, and lead is stored in bones. So I always think like when we're pregnant or when we're going through perimenopause and menopause and the bones start to break down,
Yeah.
are
Then your
we
lead levels
releasing
are coming
then
up.
lead? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely are. And so there, estrogen one to preserve the bone density so you don't put this stuff out into your blood. And also estrogen's very neuroprotective
Mhm.
against lots of different toxins. So, it's one of the things that you're trying to hold together is that whole bone density thing. And so estrogen's in there, vitamin K, vitamin D, those are all part of holding that all together. But when I look at the heavy metal, the whole blood metals, there's a pattern where you'll see calcium is high and lead is high and strontium is high. Then they're osteopenic or osteoporotic.
Ah, okay. Interesting. Yeah, and I heard you say on a podcast that progesterone acts like a bitter.
Yeah, it does. It opens up bile flow, opens up your liver, gets that going. When you taste it, it's incredibly bitter,
Yeah.
and it's working on the GABA receptors in the brain. So you got to see like GABA is parasympathetic. It's rest, digest, repair, regenerate, detoxify. It's healing, it's calming, it's bile flow, it's everything flowing. Estrogen is the associated, so progesterone is associated with GABA and that whole calm flowing thing. Estrogen is associated with the glutamate receptors in the
Yeah.
brain. So like glutamate excitotoxicity. So it's more sympathetic, fight or flight, more locked, a little more stressed. I mean, don't get me wrong, estrogen has a lot of like making you cheery and bringing up your libido and giving you focus and stuff. But on this detox side, it's a little bit more constrictive, and so you're working with the whole system at once.
Cool.
Hormones, liver, cells, they're all on this sort of rhythm, and you got to get them to relax and let go and get all the toxins to flow all at once. So, when we talk about like putting you on heavy metal detox, we're going to talk about how you're taking your progesterone, and then the whole way that detox works, and the reason ours works so well and doesn't have all these side effects, all these nanoparticle delivery of all these compounds, everything comes in at the same time, gets the cells to dump to the blood, the liver to pull from the blood into the liver, and then the liver to dump with the bile. If you don't move bile, you don't move toxins. And then once you get to the GI, the binders come in and absorb all those toxins so you don't reabsorb them. And so that whole relay race handoff, cell to blood, blood to liver, liver to bile, bile to GI, GI to the binder, and then poop out the binder. That just makes for smooth sailing of all these things. And then we're just going to make sure that your head space and your hormone space is working in concert with that.
Do you see that there's any difference between this process and how it influences this process, topical progesterone versus oral progesterone?
Uh, Usually, yes, the topical, you get a larger hit of progesterone coming through the blood. It turns to allopregnanolone and goes to the brain and affects the GABA receptors. And so that's usually for sleep. That's thought of as the better one. And the serums just aren't able to get, or not the serums, the creams usually aren't able to get the blood levels to do that. With the nano serum, we've seen no problem. You definitely get it into the serum. People sleep like a baby. You put it on, in 10 minutes, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
I feel it, and you slide off your chair. And so, when we're dosing people, we say, 2-3 pumps at night. In the morning, if you're prone to anxiety or breakthrough anxiety, then you'll do a pump during the day. Otherwise, you might not take it. Because then also the nanopregnanolone that's in the DHEA plus, we did a whole study on that with women. It just moves right into progesterone. And so that morning pregnenolone oral gives you, like, your pregnenolone levels will go from like 1 to 3.5 or 4. It's like
Nice.
really solid bump of progesterone. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
the pregnenolone goes, it goes up quite a bit, but a whole bunch shifts over into progesterone. So you get like a 3-point bump in your serum progesterone, which when you're in
And
follicular, you really see that a little bit less so in luteal.
yeah. What about like the fact that oral is going through the first hepatic pass of the liver and creating a lot more metabolites? Is there any, do you know if there's any strain on the liver with that process? Or because I have
Probably.
read a
I mean,
little bit that too much of that can cause inflammation in the system.
yeah, now because of the nature of progesterone, it's kind of a calm one. Maybe it doesn't do it, but back when they were trying to do oral testosterone, there was something called methyl testosterone, and that was like an absorbable one, and it would hit the liver and just like blow up the liver. It was horrible. It's like when we look at the DHEA, uh, we're having people take 50 to 100 milligrams a day of DHEA. I mean, that's like a massive amount, right?
It's
And
a
their
massive
blood
amount.
levels are like 5, 6, 700. They think
Too
that's
much.
abnormal. I just got my son, like my friend Lauren Bramley says that there's certain hormone types, your personalities are
Yes.
certain types, and she's like, "You're a DHEA type." And when I started reading my own DHEA, it was I was already in my 40s, and it was 450. I just ran my 22-year-old son's DHEA is 540. It's like it's fine to have really high DHEA levels, right? And so people have these high DHEA levels, but they don't have the acne and the hair loss and the hair growth and all the androgenic issues, because that nanoparticle is going in like right through the mouth, through the stomach. It's not going into first pass in this one big wallop. I mean, it'll all eventually make its way through there, but it's not like wham. And I think when you take the capsule, it all goes through into the liver and blows into a ton of different metabolites, many of which we don't even track. And I think these are androgenic metabolites that give you those androgenic symptoms, because we see it all move into testosterone. In fact, the DHEA sulfate and the testosterone come up together. And people's testosterone will be running like 60 to 120, like really freaking high from this DHEA and the conversion. But because of the way the conversion happens in the nanoparticles, you don't get this liver stress and you don't show these things. And so I'm really happy with both the topical delivery and the liposome delivery, the oral liposome. And it's just, progesterone and estrogen, we can't do them that way. For oral, they'd have to go through a compounding pharmacy.
Yeah. DHEA oral, I rarely ever tell a woman to take more than 10 milligrams because of that. Because I think when it is in a higher dose, taking it orally, you're swallowing it, and you're right, it has to get pushed down quickly through these pathways, and it'll shuttle it down that 5-alpha reductase pathway, and then you start growing a beard, which women don't want. No, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think there's other metabolites we don't even know, where the things we don't even track.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of see you as a bit of a mad scientist. Like, you guys have so many different
You definitely be the
concoctions.
first person that's ever said that.
Well, because
You
I've
had
listened
to
to
be the
you for a
first person,
long
yeah.
time. And I say that with the most love and care. Like, I think it's
Yeah.
great. I just see you in the back in your lab, like, okay, what can I make now?
Yeah,
And you're
what are we
making
gonna do now?
incredible products. So
Well,
it's working for you, being a mad
yeah.
scientist. It's working
No,
for
no, it's
you.
like I got to get a job doing exactly, what I do. It's like I'm just gonna be myself and go, this is pretty easy. I got to start my own company in order to do it.
Yeah.
But that's
But
what I'm
it's
doing.
quality products. So I appreciate it. So let's jump into the whole heavy metal, because I tell you, Chris, the amount of information, the conflicting information on how to properly detox heavy metals. And I
Yeah.
mean, we can safely say we all have heavy metals at this point, right? Everybody's got heavy metals. Some people just don't do well with it. Others do fine, and they seem to not be
Yeah.
bothered by it,
Oh
right?
yeah. I mean, just looking at the levels doesn't tell you how bad off the person is. I've seen some people be all right on pretty high levels. I mean, you bring them down, they're always better, but it's like, and then somebody else is a disaster.
Yeah. Do you see, is there a list of symptoms, top 5 symptoms where you can say, like, oh, this person's definitely heavy metal toxic? Like, is there a set of, like, okay, this is
Well,
because, it's so hard to go, is this from heavy metals? I mean, we've all got heavy metals. Are my health problems because of the heavy metals? I don't know.
yeah. Yeah, I know it's tough. And you
Mhm.
can test, you can sort of look at your history. There's some that are more, and I used to have these lists. I mean, we have them around here somewhere that are on our website somewhere, a list of different symptoms that go along with heavy metals. But sort of the number one, number two are anxiety and fatigue. And anxiety is the way the heavy metals work with the glutamate receptors. And so the glutamate receptors get hyperactivated by the heavy metals. And, in mercury toxicity, you can even see this, lesions on the glutamate receptors in the brain.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and that's also, what makes it worse during perimenopause and menopause. If you've got the estrogen progesterone mismatch where you're estrogen dominant and the metals are happening there at the same time, you get a really, accentuated, all the anxiety and the irritability gets real bad. So metals do that, and then the fatigue is their effect on the mitochondria. So metals really
Okay.
knock out the mitochondria, and so your metabolism gets weaker. People have a harder time losing weight. They have a harder time exercising. Energy wise, it also affects adrenals and affects thyroid pretty heavily. It's the T4 to T3 conversion. Mercury, cadmium, and arsenic all block the deiodinase that takes the circulating T4 and turns it into the active T3 peripherally. And so when you're looking at thyroid labs too, you'll see if you're looking at free T4 and free T3, even just total T3 and T4, you'll see T4 up a little high and T3 low. That's usually a sign that the metals are in there monkeying around with things.
Wow. Well, that's what led me to finally test for heavy metals was I had a poor T4 to T3 conversion, had severe
Yeah.
weight loss resistance, chronic
Yeah.
migraines, and
Oh yeah, there you go.
and so I was like,
You
I
hit a
gotta
bunch of
start.
this stuff right there.
Right. But you're one of the first people that it's even said those as a list of some symptoms,
Oh, that's
because
funny.
when I read the symptoms of heavy metals at that time, I was like, oh no, I don't have heavy metals. I don't have those symptoms. And then I went and got
Yeah, they put too
tested
many
and it was
symptoms on
like
the
off the
list.
charts. So it was
Yeah,
like, oh,
maybe I
maybe
did.
this is it. Maybe this is the conversion problem that I'm having is from heavy metals. So
Yeah, and metals are, one of the harder things to detoxify or take the longest. It's because you're turning over protein stores and releasing these out over long periods of time. You have them all kind of sequestered all around. I mean, not to mention bones that are a 7-year safe deposit box, because that's just slowly coming out all the time for the lead. But it's, whereas it's like, oh, I have, there's glyphosate in me or some pesticides. Give me a month on advanced push catch and you're good.
yeah,
But the metals, that takes a couple of months. That's,
just a
you know,
couple months,
yeah, I know people talk about years and stuff,
years, like seven
but it,
years, I've
7 years.
heard.
Well, there's going to be a concerted effort for a couple of months where you're going to be
Okay.
on a formal detox, and then there's stuff you're just going to keep doing, and then
Okay.
year after year you got to keep revisiting that, especially lead, and so it's like minimum bottle of EDTA every year. But EDTA has been like my best friend because it's really good when you're dealing with chronic infections too. It was like a
Oh,
major factor in curing Lyme for me.
what?
I had all
Really?
the right herbs. In fact, we just released 2 Lyme products, and they're designed to go with the EDTA. EDTA
I
is
didn't
a
know
great
that.
biofilm breaker, a great one. It's an
Did I know
anticoagulant, a
that?
biofilm breaker, and a nitric oxide upregulator. And oh, and it happens to bind lead too. And we get all hung up on the
Wow.
lead, and but then you see
Yeah.
like in the chelation trials for circulation, especially the people who had diabetic foot, the ones who were diabetic got massive effects from the ED10. It was really opening things up and getting the blood flow down to the edges of the body. And who's to say there wasn't biofilms in there that were
Mhm,
preventing
mhm.
all that circulation? I mean, it's probably what was going on. In fact, even when they pull out cardiovascular plaque, they're finding that it's alive, that there's biofilms in there. So biofilms are the goo that organisms make around them to shield themselves from the immune system. Immune system can kind of smell them, but can't find them. And then when the immune system's calmed down, then they come out, crawl out of their slimy homes and go wreak havoc. And, these are
Mhm,
big things on us. And we're just starting to understand the microbiome of our
mhm,
vascular system. And
mhm.
so EDTA is really good at opening that all up. I was just blown away by how well it worked.
And
Really helps brain.
and EDTA is the number one. So for those listening, it's the number one chelator they say to get rid of lead. It
Lead.
has an affinity for lead.
Yeah.
Now the problem that we see with so many different chelators, and Chris is going to talk to us about this, is that they don't, when they bind to, you can think of the chelators as going to grab onto these heavy metals and then they're supposed to just pull them out of the system and great. However, what typically happens is that'll bind to these heavy metals, but then as it's moving its way out, it can drop that heavy metal and then you redistribute. And that's where a lot of people get sick
Yeah.
from these heavy metal chelation protocols because there isn't anything there to catch the heavy metals that are going to get dropped by these chelators. And that's where the danger comes in. And so EDTA is not a great, it doesn't have a great like bind to it, does it? Like it does, but it drops it, I've heard,
Yeah, people
partially.
talk, what they talk. I think EDTA is a fantastic one for lead. And you can bring in DMSA too to help with lead.
Yep.
For mercury, cadmium, and arsenic, you could do that all with a glutathione system, just amplifying your own glutathione system. EDTA for lead, whenever you're going to use a chelator, if it's EDTA, DMSA, DMPS, you got to have all your drainage paths up and flowing. So we use kidney care as our formula to open up, and you want to promote diuresis and get the lymphatic flow going so that when you do pick up the metals, they're quick to get out through the kidney into the urinary stream. Like we have metal binders that we eat and go through the GI so that when they come out in the bile with like glutathione or metallothionein, that they can bind onto something so they don't release and get reabsorbed. The kidneys, you don't have any binder in there, so you just want to get that flow really happening, be drinking a lot of water and move all that stuff through. And
Mm-hmm.
also, people do these real big chelations. They'll go in and get like 3 grams IV because they have to do it IV. And then you're always going to grab some, you're going to drop some along the way. But if you got 3 grams going in there, grabbing a whole lot, you're going to drop a whole lot. But if you're coming in like day by day with smaller amounts, where I'm using 200 to 400 milligrams a day, tops occasionally I'll go up to 800 milligrams. That's a much slower, more gradual ride. And so you don't threaten really upending the whole cart. And you start, and beauty here with these are oral liposomes, you can start at a 1/4 teaspoon, go to a 1/2 teaspoon, a full teaspoon. Incidentally, full teaspoon is 210 milligrams. And then you can titrate yourself up as you're tolerating it, as you get all those channels all moving, and then you throw the EDTA into that, the whole process is much smoother.
Yeah, so it's basically like we got to set the groundwork before we jump into these,
Oh,
heavy
yeah.
metal chelation protocols.
Yeah,
Because
I mean, the whole
most of us,
start
if
of
we have heavy metals, is because we're not detoxing very well. So you got to get these
exactly.
pathways up.
Yeah, I mean, we're not in, the industrial times where we're working in battery factories and stuff. And like, actually, Unityol is the Russian name for DMPS. It was developed for guys working at battery factories. They had lead and cadmium, massive amounts, and you'd throw a bunch of DMPS at them, and they would, piss out these massive amounts, and they would like get them working again. But for us, it's chronically not detoxifying, is chronically building up the metals till it's a problem. So the whole start of the company as it is now, I was just doing the testing on the different forms of mercury, and I wanted to have people do chelation challenge tests and send them to me, and I'd tell them how much methyl and inorganic mercury they have, how much is amalgam, how much is from fish. And I got my amalgams out and started taking DMPS or DMSA, and I didn't have any of these channels open. I just freaking destroyed myself. I wasted myself out,
That's what I
and I
did.
was just a wreck. And then I fixed myself with all this stuff. I first made IMD, and that just switched it all around. And then I found
Ah.
liposomal glutathione, and that took it even farther. And everything was built from there. I freaking, just about killed myself on DMSA. I fixed myself with IMD.
Have you heard of other people losing eyesight from chelation?
From metal toxicity, there's a narrowing. Was it a narrowing of the visual field,
No,
or
it
was it just
was both
blurry?
close up and blurry, close up and far away. I had perfect vision my whole life until I started chelating.
I have heard that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
My naturopath had heard of that too, and I've
yeah,
seen it. I've read it a few times on forums, but it's very rare to happen. And I tested it out to make sure: is this really what's causing this, or am I just getting old?
yeah.
Like, am I just
That
happens
does
to
happen
coincide
too.
with age,
They go at the same time.
right?
But yeah, I mean, if your vision's like this and you start metal detox and it goes like that over the cliff, then it's
Yeah,
probably that.
yeah.
But that can all be regained. But it's going to be, So I'm gonna want to do like 3 months with you before you retest, so that we can have a nice steady run. Just really pull everything down, and we'll titrate up the amount of IMD and EDTA that you're doing along with that core advanced push catch protocol.
Mm. What's IMD, just so for other people to hear?
IMD is a product that we make that are tiny silica grains with tons of
Mhm.
surface area on them. And on all that surface area, there's these little threads that are grafted on, and on the tip of the thread, they have a sulfhydryl group, which is a metal binding group. And so it's like a furry tennis ball that's super tiny, and all these hairs have binders. And so it's like this chelator that goes through your GI tract and just like grabs onto metals and holds onto them and pulls them all through. You never absorb it. It's just taking the metals out of the GI, like the metals that have come from the bile. That's how everything gets out. We miss this whole thing, is that every toxin leaves the liver through the bile. And if you're cholestatic, that means you're not making bile. You're toxostatic. You're not moving toxins either. So you need to get the bile flow going, and then those metals come down there, and then the IMD grabs them so you don't reabsorb.
Okay. I want to talk to you about other very common ingredients to use in heavy metal chelation protocols, because there's obviously a reason why you've chosen the things that you've chosen,
Yep.
right? Glutathione being one of the number one things that you use. So it's our master detoxer. It's
Mercury, cadmium, and arsenic all make mercury or metal glutathione conjugates, and then you have a transport system that recognizes them, moves them from the cell to the blood, blood to the liver, liver to the bile, and blood to the kidney and into the urine. So that is why we use glutathione, because the transport system that moves things out is based on making metal glutathione conjugates. But lead doesn't make a metal glutathione conjugate. That's why the EDTA is in there.
okay. And you use alpha lipoic acid, which is another very common thing to use. And that one crosses one of the only ones, I think, to cross the blood-brain barrier to get mercury out.
Uh, yes, it does cross the blood-brain barrier, and it's mistaken as a chelator. And this was the Andy Cutler thing.
Okay, yeah. This is
And
what I want to talk about.
yeah, that guy was flat out insane. I mean, he died before he was even 60. So I don't think he ever succeeded in getting the metals out of his body.
No.
But lipoic acid isn't really the chelator directly. It's a very strong NRF2 upregulator. When you turn on NRF2, NRF2 is a protein that's outside of the nucleus in the cell, and it when certain things trigger it, it's held in place out there by this thing called KEAP1, and certain enzyme inducers will trigger NRF2 to go into the nucleus and upregulate production of all of your inner detoxification chemistry. So you'll make more glutathione, more copies of glutathione esteraserase, more copies of the transporters, more copies of superoxide dismutase, more copies of metallothionein, which is another intracellular chelator. So you turn up your own chelation, and that pushes the metals out of the cells. And so, in fact, even like DMSA doesn't get into the cells, it just picks up whatever's outside the cells. So you need the cells to kick things out. That's what the lipoic acid does. NRF2 gets you to squeeze the sponge and push things out. So Cutler was right in start with the DMSA, clear out the blood as much as you can, then add in the lipoic acid. Now, he was wrong. He thought that, oh, it's because it goes and chelates the brain and we want to do that last. Well, it's getting all the tissues to dump more of their cellular stores of metals into the blood so the DMSA can get it and take it out. And it does go into the brain and do that as well.
And what about the theory of having to take these things in their half-life? Are we eliminating that by using the binders that are in your right? I spent months waking up every 4 hours taking my chelators because I got to take them in the half-life. Oh my,
Yeah,
it
all right.
drove me nuts. It was
Part
terrible. I
valid,
had a terrible
part-
experience with it.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. His whole thing. He's going to sell you on his program. You're going to feel worse for the first 52 cycles. That's 1 full year. You're going to feel worse, and then you'll come back to how you did feel, and then you'll feel better. Like, who the fuck pays for this kind of a thing? I'm telling you, in 3 months, you're going to feel way better. 6
I
would be
know.
like to the moon.
But it's so for those that don't understand what we're talking about, Andy Cutler protocol is extremely popular. I was in the group. It's like this cult-ish group. I had to get out
It
and
is
had to completely
100% a
switch
cult, and
gears.
it's all
I
because
hated it.
Andy was a horribly abusive male figure, horribly emotionally and verbally abusive. And all these people with father figure issues gravitated there, and anybody who said anything against the
Oh,
protocol was
you were
instantly
shot down.
ostracized, cast out, shunned after he
Totally
would just
hung.
verbally abuse the hell out of them. They are all so freaking crazy. And I went to go over to Health Optimization Summit and lecture over in England, and this guy named
Yep.
Tim Gray over there
Yep.
who runs that. And Tim was in the Cutler world he was dealing with mercury toxicity forever, and it was just a mess. And then he hears about this IMD stuff, and I'm like, yeah, don't do that shit. Here, do this. You'll get better in no time. And sure enough, fixed him. And so when I'm going over there, he's like trying to promote Health Optimization Summit. He calls some people from the list, and they say, we refuse to go to your program. And he's like, why? Because you have a murderer. And he's like, excuse me? Chris Shade is a murderer.
No. Oh
So
my
I
gosh.
changed my business cards from Christopher Shade, PhD, to Christopher Shade,
A
PhD,
murderer.
comma, MDR.
Oh.
Murderer. So how do we get to murderer, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the murderer is because I don't subscribe to the half-life dosing.
Okay.
But that's actually not true either. I do subscribe to it with DMSA. Because
Oh.
DMSA, you're taking a kind of binding for mercury that you don't have any of in your blood. You got zero. And then you take this pill, and in an hour and a half, boom, you have very high blood levels of this binder, or of this complexing agent. It's not even a true chelate. And then a couple hours later, boom, you have zero. So you are disrupting the spread of mercury's speciation, what it's bound to. And so it goes from 0 to 100 and 100 to 0, and that can, move stuff around. And so the half-life is you go up, you come down, dose again, you go up, and you do this for a couple of days to keep your blood levels from going down to 0. And that should move more of it out without redepositing it. That, has a decent story to it. Now, if you take lipoic acid the way I'm explaining it as an NRF2 upregulator, then you're taking the glutathione system and bumping it up 5 to 20%. And so you take, you're never at 0. Here's your glutathione system. You put that lipoic acid in, it comes up a little bit. And then when it comes down, it comes back down. So it's you're just giving it a little juice, but it's never going back down to 0. It's just going back down to where it was. So it's not this big reorganization that we have to reorganize our whole life around. And he had one paper where lipoic acid was disturbing the metal homeostasis and redistributing metals. It was an animal paper. It was a rat or a mouse paper. It's called the Gregus paper. And I'm probably, me and a couple other people are the only ones qualified to read the damn thing.
Yeah.
And sure enough, lipoic acid was turning glutathione production way up. And with glutathione production going up, all these metals were coming out with it. And they did it at a couple of different doses. At reasonable doses, you saw that happen. At unreasonable doses, these would equal 14 to 20 grams of lipoic acid in an adult human.
Oh my God. That's, yeah.
At those doses, it consumed all the glutathione because the glutathione had to detoxify it, and then the metals got all scrambled around. Only at that 14-gram dose. There was no redistribution at these regular doses.
Yeah.
And it behaved just like anybody who understands NRF2 and glutathione cycling of metals. It did exactly what it was supposed to do until you got to these ridiculous doses, and nobody does those ridiculous doses.
No, that's it's usually like 25 to 100 milligrams, would you say?
Milligrams. I'm talking about grams.
Milligrams. Yeah. So we're talking about thousands of grams. Yeah. No, there's a huge difference. Yeah. No, that's not. I could see that that would be a thing.
And
DMPS,
for my heterodoxy, I was assigned the term murderer. Now, we haven't seen any of these people who have died, and their answer to that is that's because they're dead.
Oh, geez.
So you never heard about it.
No. Oh my goodness.
I'm like, whoa, man, what are they doing here? Let's go to Crazy Town.
Oh, let's go to Crazy Town. Yeah, and their thing was like these really tiny, tiny doses. And I had decided after trying it and I was gaining rapid weight when I was on them. It was horrible, inflamed and losing my eyesight. And I was
Knew
like, you know what?
nothing. They
This
knew
is
nothing
not
about.
working.
And he thought that all people's glutathione systems behaved exactly the same. Like apparently nobody explained genomics to him. There were no SNPs or anything, and there's no functional up or down. Like any inflammation's turning down the glutathione system. He didn't recognize any of that. He didn't know anything about liver cycling. Didn't know anything about bile. Didn't know anything about kidney.
Yeah.
It was just
They didn't
like,
talk about any of that.
I mean, I'm glad he, did some work on it long ago, but you got to be like, hey man, this is what I got at the time, and you got to be ready for more. But nope, here is the gospel, the
Yeah.
word
Yeah.
of Andrew, the gospel
Yeah.
of Andrew Cutler.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't recommend anybody doing it after trying it out and being part of that group. I was just
Yeah.
like, get me out of here
Then watch
now.
when you do ours, it's going to be totally
I
different.
know.
You're like,
Yes. Oh,
great.
yes. Thankfully. Uh, do you know much about I've talked about this a little bit on my podcast when I did. I'll link to these ones in my show notes, everyone. But I did a podcast kind of about the different chelation processes that I've been through, and one of them that I used and I'm still using today, which I'm really praying that Chris isn't going to shoot down, is a guy by the name of Boyd Haley created a product called OSR. And this was supposed to be this really good chelator that bound to it and never let
So,
mercury go. What?
yeah, Boyd and I have been around. He's a dog's age older than me, but the coot is still kicking around, and I still see him at IOMT meetings, and I'm happy that he's still here.
Okay.
And he started that about the same time I was coming into business, and people
Which
like,
his product's not available anymore, just so people know. I had to get it like off the black market, basically. So I don't recommend people
yeah,
doing it. But
yeah,
I'd like
yeah.
your
And
I'd like
it
your
was
take on
it
it.
was a chelator molecule that was very fat soluble, and the idea was it would grab the mercury, and it would be a very strong bond for mercury, and then
Very
it would
strong bond.
partition into the fat, and then slowly make its way out of the body. If you have a high circulating load of mercury and you want to move some of it into a less bad location, that's probably a good way to go. It's probably good for brain mercury. At the time, Hal Huggins was using both my stuff and Boyd's, and we'd go back and forth and try them both in clinic. Klinghardt had started using OSR,
Yeah.
and he was like, it just didn't come through the way I really thought it would. Sort of like towards
Hmm.
the end of a detox, put it in there, kind of polishes and helps clean the brain up some more, but it wasn't as much of a driver as I thought it was going to be.
Okay.
Uh, and so, I mean, if I had a couple boxes of it here, I'd try it out. And,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
never have had it, but a lot of people along the way have used both ours and Boyd's, especially people in the dentistry. And so, yeah, I got nothing bad to say about OSR.
Oh,
I like it.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That makes me feel better about it. And like I said, people can't really get it. You can, but you can't. So it's not something I recommend. It's just one of the ones that seem to not have as harmful effect on me than the other ones. Uh, Another one that I mean, a lot of naturopathic doctors and lots of people online, cilantro and the chlorella. And you don't
So
have, I have not seen a
the old
product of
old
yours
way
that
to
has
go.
that.
Yeah, the old naturopath way to go was cilantro as a mobilizer, something that moves the mercury out into circulation, and then chlorella as the binder, GI binder, and so that was what people were using when I got into the field. And let's
Yeah,
take
yeah,
first just the binder. So chlorella does have a lot of binding ability, very strong metal binding, but well, not at a high concentration, and meaning you need a lot of tablets to do
that's
what
what I
little bit
thought.
of IMD does. So IMD, one little 100 milligram scoop, it's like the tiny little pile of it there
It's so
does what
small.
about
Yeah.
70 chlorella tablets do.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
I remember being with Mercola and I'm like, dude, you got to try the new stuff. And he's like, I don't need that. I have
I
chlorella. I'm
take, yeah,
like,
and he takes like 40
you're going to
tablets a day
be,
or 100
you
or
know,
something. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, you're going to take all those, you're going to be
Yeah.
pooping green for days. And so this is a much more efficient, way than the chlorella. Chlorella does other things too. And I like chlorella, but
Yeah.
you want just the best binder. There's the best binder. So now mobilizers. Now, what does even a mobilizer mean? So for me, mobilizer means that you bind metals to glutathione and move them out of the cell into circulation. So that means you have to upregulate glutathione production and phase two activity, the glutathione transferase activity. The mobilization in the term of cilantro, they didn't even know what that meant. They were like muscle testing people, and it would move and how people felt and stuff. And they don't know what molecule even did it in there. And they'd be like, well, it has to be fresh cilantro, and these brands seem to be good, and it can't be dry, and this stuff's real magic over here, but it's just like there's no way to standardize it, and there's no way for me to create a scientific program around it. So I'm like, well, I'm going to look up all this stuff that works in the glutathione system because I know what it does. There's a lot of literature on it. I know what kind of concentrations roughly I got to get to make these things work, and I can buy it, in a pure compound or standardized, and then I can make a very scientific system that way.
Okay. Yeah. And I know Dr. Klinghardt too. I mean, he was one of the only people that would say, like, if you're going to use these, you got to use them in high amounts. And he
Yeah,
was like, yeah, 30 tablets 3 times a day or something like
yeah,
this, not in these little
yeah.
tiny amounts,
And then
because
and
if you
then
did that, it
Klinghardt,
could redistribute.
Klinghardt had microsilica. Do you remember that?
Yep. Yep.
His binder. That's IMD. I
Yeah.
make that.
Yeah.
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 So he saw that. In fact, I gave a talk up there on the day of my 40th birthday. It was like and that's when all this stuff started. I had this bottle of IMD up there, and he's like, Chris, bring that new powder up here. And he like muscle tests me. He's like, oh my God, this stuff's amazing. And then he starts selling it right away.
Yeah.
And he still sells chlorella, but he's like, well, this is the perfect binder. I'm going to start selling this. And he picked up. We made a couple of different products for him.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. I like his work. I think he's one of the
Yeah.
few that knows what he's doing out there when it comes to that.
Dietrich has done a lot of good work over a
He
long
has.
period of
Yeah.
time before I got here. And now he still does it. I just I've been seeing him. I was with him at Autism One maybe a year ago. Yeah, he does good work.
Have you been using with your products with autistic kids?
Oh yeah, we did a ton of autism.
Do you?
Uh, I used to
Good
go to
results,
Autism One every
obviously.
year, and a lot of toxic kids there. And
Hmm.
really, it was them that I formed the whole system the way it is because they were so difficult to detoxify. Anything you give them
Oh.
winds them up, and it's both immune wind up and neurological wind up. So uh, I had to, on one hand, try to calm the brain and the immune system, and on the other hand, make a seamless relay of moving the toxins out. And so getting the detoxification coupled to bile flow and then binders right after it was huge to move the stuff, get it out in the GI and bind it. And then for calming down the neurological and immunological side, we use CBD and or GABA. And that was brilliant. That would just calm them down. And then boom, you could move the toxins, get them out, bind them, and wrap up your little detox show before the CBD or GABA wore off.
So would you say then that, like, with your experience with kids with autism, how much is it heavy metals or I guess toxins just in general, would you say? Or were you
There's a
seeing that it's
lot of
heavy
toxins,
metal, a
but
lot of induced by
it,
heavy metals?
I think it can be induced by heavy metals, but once it's induced, you're going to accumulate all the toxins that you touch, and then you're going to be toxic from them. So where did it start? And now they're finding more and more it's an autoimmunity generated in the brain, and early on, and that propagates through the system and causes all these other things. So once you're autistic
Mm,
and you've been autistic for a while, you're freaking toxic because your whole system's been all jacked. Now, did the toxins get you there, or did some other immunological event get you there early on, or did you
mhm.
accumulate the toxins afterward? In the end, it doesn't really matter. You're going to have to get them out.
Yeah.
and they're going to function better. And I've had, basically, I'd say, once they're about 13, they can do full adult doses of the detox. And I've had kids that, there's one guy that had 9 straight months of push catch, and like all these different things were happening, and they were getting a lot of, you know, a lot of the behaviors were getting less bad, and a lot of the, unless it's like right when it happened, you don't have that, oh, I could pulled my kid totally out of autism. If they've been autistic for a while, it's more incremental. You're getting more functioning back. But we had great success in it.
Wow.
Still have a
Uh,
lot of autism practitioners and mothers and stuff. So we have a lot of our product out there in the autism world.
and this is a hot topic, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but the whole
COVID vaccine.
vaccination with heavy metals, like, do we still see mercury being used in vaccines?
No, no, not the pediatric vaccines. They took it out.
No.
And then people
Okay.
got this story that, well, they put it in, then they say they take it out, but I know it's still in there. And it's like, no,
That's
it's
what I
not.
heard. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Laura Hewitson runs Thoughtful House, got a bunch of the new vaccines and sent them to me for analysis. There was nothing in there. There was no
Oh,
mercury.
good. Okay.
And we've done monkey brain samples and stuff. They did a bunch of studies on vaccines and metals and stuff. And back when mercury was in the vaccines, that could really be a trigger for this kind of like neuroautoimmune
Yeah.
generated
Yeah.
autism, because mercury is an adjuvant. They said they had it in there as an antimicrobial, but it was used in veterinary vaccines as an adjuvant, as something that winds up the immune system and gets a big response.
Right.
And it's so neurotoxic, it was ethyl mercury they were using. So when that was in there, I could see that being a trigger for some of the kids, or a
Yeah.
co-trigger for some of the kids. But it's not in there anymore, and we're still getting lots of it. And there's a lot of aluminum in there now, and it's just
Hmm.
it's a
Yeah.
messy world we're in right now. And
It's
then
a
all
messy world.
God,
Yeah.
yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't think there's a straight answer. And I don't want to get
No,
into
there's
the whole
not.
debate of pro or against. It's like,
Everybody, you know,
it's just,
one, we shouldn't have the metals in the vaccines. Two, we shouldn't
no.
be
Yeah.
stacking vaccines. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
God, it seemed like 70% of the cases that I met were like, who were talking about it being related to vaccines. They got 5 to 7 vaccines in one shot when they were sick already. Drag them into the doctor. Doctor hasn't seen them in forever, and then pow, 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 pow. That means all those vaccines and all those adjuvants all at once, just onto a
Yeah.
system that's already sick, and that's why they're there.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
should be getting them like one at a time when they're not sick.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's, those are all just
That's kind of like the
stupid.
best theory I heard behind it, which was it's not that they cause autism, but it can be the what is the saying, the camel that breaks, or the straw that breaks
Yeah,
the
the
camel's
straw that
back, or
breaks
whatever.
the
Yeah,
camel's back.
yeah.
Right,
That
right.
that it can just be like that's too much. It's an overload on the system,
Yeah.
on an
It
already
puts the
fragile
spark
system.
that lights all that straw on
Yeah,
fire or
yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah. Because I always wonder, like, where the hell did my mercury come from? I mean, I got no feelings. I've never had a mercury amalgam, and I was as high as it could go on mercury. And I was like, and
On
but
what?
my mom was. I did a pre and post provocation test, and I would like to talk about that too with you.
Yeah, you'll have to send that to me. And you eat fish though?
No, I eat very little
I remember
fish.
this guy. I ran his he taught this like functional medicine school, and I ran his mercury test, and his methyl mercury, which is only from fish, eating fish, was 20, which is freaking screaming high. And he's like,
Okay.
nah, I don't eat fish. Nah. I'm like, dude, you freaking eat fish, man. It's right there. He's like, all right, I just got back from my twice yearly fishing trip in Florida. It was like, and you just told me you don't eat fish. Like, yes, you
I
do.
will eat a can of tuna maybe once a month,
Once a month. All right. Well, let's see your results
but
too.
no other
Because
fish.
the pre and post, it's because they're not doing it against a reference range of chelated of a chelator in the urine, and so that reference range is for unchelated urine. So you hit the top of that like all the time. You take a couple. Did you use DMPS or DMSA?
DMPS and
DMPS.
Maybe EDTA too. Yeah, EDTA
DMPS
and
is
DMP.
strong. You'll
EDTA with a
blow a lot.
DMPS push. That's what it
Oh,
was.
DMPS push.
At the end. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll move a lot of mercury,
Yeah.
and you're thinking, oh my God, it's as high as it could go, but the chart ends at 9. When Mark Hyman did his, he was 287. And yours
What?
is probably like 12 or something. And it looks like it's
Right.
off the chart, but I mean, you're just starting. I mean, it's, really anything below
Right.
40 is nothing.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Um, so what we're talking about here, folks, is different types of testing that you can do for heavy metals. There's really not a great, like, there's not great ways to test for heavy metals. So what I've done in the past is done a pre and post provocation. So they test your urine and then you do an IV with a chelator, and then they test your urine again for 6 hours afterwards to see what you pee out. So the chelators go in and they start pulling the heavy metals out, and then you can kind of test and compare the two.
Yep.
Now, what is your test? Like, how does your test differ? Because you do hair, urine, and blood, correct?
You do, yeah, blood, hair, and urine, no chelators. And the whole chelator thing, 30 years ago, we didn't have analytical equipment good enough to look at what your mercury in urine was just regularly. I mean, some, academic groups could, but it wasn't just commercially available. And and so they would say, like, and the blood levels, like, you couldn't read ambient blood levels of the metals very easily, and so they would have this story that there's no mercury in your blood or urine until the chelator pushes it out. And it's like, no,
Mhm.
that's not true at all. There's just the levels were low, and then the chelator makes them high. And so it makes them high in proportion to how much you have circulating in your blood. So when you couldn't see it before, it was a tool to get enough into the urine that you could read it. But now we have the equipment that we don't need to do that. We can read what's in the blood ambient, without any push. And the other thing that we needed besides good analytical sensitivity was speciation, where we could separate different forms of mercury. So inorganic mercury and methyl mercury need to be separated and looked at individually. They're almost like different metals. One, methyl mercury is coming from fish. It's very mobile through the body. It gets across the blood-brain barrier, comes back out of the blood-brain barrier, kind of goes everywhere because your body thinks it's an amino acid. The other one, inorganic mercury, is more sticky. That's coming from dental amalgam. It sticks to tissues more. If it's in the brain, it's very slow to come out, but if it's in the blood, it doesn't go back into the brain. And in the urine, you only get inorganic mercury. In the hair, you only get methyl mercury. In the blood, you have both. And so our mercury test, for blood, hair, and urine, you compare methyl mercury in the blood to methyl mercury in the hair as a measure of how well you're mobilizing methyl mercury to get it out of the body. And then you do inorganic mercury in the blood versus inorganic mercury in the urine. And that's a measure of how well the kidneys are filtering out inorganic mercury from your blood. So you look at all those together, you see what are the forms and how are they being excreted.
And does yours have like a wide reference range then where it goes up
Yes,
super high?
my bar, I just keep getting it bigger. You never go off the end. I just get
Okay.
the bar underneath it just gets longer. So when we ran Tony Robbins, he was
Yeah.
125. I had to make a really long bar.
That's how I
Nobody
first
goes
heard
off the
about you,
chart.
was because I heard that he had heavy metal toxicity and it was Quicksilver Scientific that
Yeah, I
he
was a
did to
guy
get
who
rid of
did
it.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Which, I mean, that guy needs his brain to be working on. And he was
Uh,
like,
yeah,
he was eating tuna and salmon every day, thinking he
tuna
was
and
doing himself a
swordfish.
favor.
Tuna and swordfish. He went from being a vegan to a paleo, and if you've been vegan, you can't go to the hoof, it can't moo. It's got to be a fin-based animal that makes no noise. And so we went for fish,
Pescatarian.
and this guy around him thought, oh, well, we'll get the good spiritual fish. We'll have it flown in from Hawaii, high in the food chain because, heavy metals are heavy and they sink to the bottom of the food chain. Uh-uh. Mercury goes up the food chain. So he just missed that part. So he was
Wow.
eating the highest mercury fish. he could get and just eating it all day long.
And started to run into health problems, hey?
Yeah, yeah, it's memory and fatigue.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. So maybe I don't have very much mercury then, is what you're saying.
Could be.
Could be.
Yeah, so
Maybe
yeah, I
not.
want to see the tests you have, and then you'll run our
Mhm.
tests, and then we'll, put you through the whole
There.
detox.
Yeah. That'll be very interesting to see. I'm curious because I feel like there's no safe levels of lead though, is there? Like lead of any amount now they're saying
Well,
is
safe
like
levels of any of them, but there's
no.
levels that don't seem to bother people. And
So
did you, in your
where would
challenge
these
test, did you see lead, arsenic, cadmium?
lead was highest. It
Lead
was
was the highest.
that one was at the top of the charts and mercury came just below it both times I did it.
Okay,
And I was just gonna go, I just made an appointment to go do it again before I started all of this, but
okay.
I'll do yours.
I mean, there's nothing wrong if you have data points that way, you can get another data point, and then at the end you can run that too and see how that changes.
Yeah,
Uh,
I would like to do both, maybe like
yeah,
just to see, just to compare. I haven't done one for years, so it would even just be good to see like where's it at now compared
yeah.
to where it was
I
a
had a
couple of
woman
years
I
ago.
was helping her do a long lead detox with our EDTA and some other things, and her doctor had her running. We weren't even doing lead in blood then, and he had her running a DMSA challenge or DMPS challenge, and that challenge number kept getting lower as she went through the detox. So it did work.
Yeah, but where is mercury coming from if a person's not eating fish and they have no amalgams?
Yeah, I mean, there's very few other sources of it. There's some areas where there's enough in the air to be relevant, but not a whole lot of places. There's in certain cosmetics, skin lightening creams, and you'll get these Latin Americans and Asians get into
No,
like
I
trying
go
to
skin
whiten their
darkening, not
skin.
skin lightening.
Yeah, you don't look like you're doing any skin lightening. I think that was done for you naturally. Uh, but the skin lightening creams can have a lot of mercury in them. Otherwise, yeah, it's
It can
fish.
be passed down from your mother's amalgams too, right? Oh, that's not true. You're kidding. I
Well,
tout that all the
yeah,
time. I'm like,
you
that's
can
probably where mine came from, and I was loaded with them.
bullshit.
Okay,
Because
this is
and I've
good. I want to
measured
know what the
mother's milk
bullshit
and stuff,
is.
and yeah, there's a little mercury in there, but you're never going to get enough mercury in the mother's milk to fill you with mercury that now 50 years later, 40 years later, we can still see that mercury because you're getting rid of it all the time. So
Ah,
that
what about like
hole
not
that came
even
from
passed
my
down into the
mother.
fetus?
Well, I mean, and yeah, you do, but it's going to go away, and
Okay.
it's going to be replaced by other stuff. But what you do get is often you'll get a epigenetic downregulation of your detox system, of the mercury
Mm-hmm.
detox system. So you're more likely to accumulate and store mercury. But the stuff that you're sitting on is, you can't blame your mom for it.
Okay. Is there certain genes then that specifically you see like being an issue with heavy metals? Like when you say
There's,
detoxification pathways?
that isn't super well worked out. The
Mm-hmm.
obvious players would be
Like
glutathione
methylation,
ones. So,
glutathione,
well,
methylation.
anything glutathione synthesis, glutathione transferase to the transporters, metallothionein genes, that's all defense against it. And then methylation, that'll make you more susceptible to getting into the more toxic aspects of it. And then there's some other genes that play into it, but we don't, it hasn't been super well worked out yet.
Okay. So your kit, now let's just go through this before I let you go. I just want people to know kind of because you have so many options and I'm going to put link to all of these. I'm going to put them in my shop, the ones that I'm taking and the kit. But the basic one to start with, would you say would be that advanced push catch to
Yeah.
start to kind of prep the system?
It is a great if you're real sick, like, oh man, everything I take I react to. There's one called the
Hmm.
pre-tox box, which is the lightest of them. But pretty much anyone else can go into advanced push catch, and you buy that in 1 month segments. And some people will do one for 1 month, and then they'll buy two and do a double dose for another month. Some people will just go flat at that dosing for 2, even 3 months. Then, if you want to add on more metal functionality, you can add more IMD, which is the metal binder, and EDTA for the lead, which is what we're going to do with you. Or then we have this one that's, pro only, called Cube 2.0, and that's a 9-week real intensive one.
Ugh. And what's being added to that then?
Well, that has IMD and EDTA titrated up in it. It's also
Okay.
got some NAD builders, some CBD for inflammation. That's got the whole shebang, like a very advanced protocol.
And would that be for people then that are coming out with if they take your test and they see that,
They're
they're at the
high.
Mark
Yeah.
Hyman level and the Tony
Yeah.
Robbins level,
Yeah,
that
they
would be
got to
what
do
they
the
would do?
2.0, and then they still have to do stuff after that. But there'll be a very concerted period, and then you got to keep it going for, a few months after that. And that could be any number of products for the second tail end of that.
Yeah, and if anybody's listening and they think that they're a candidate for that, then just reach out to me because I have a professional account now with Quicksilver, so I can have, because you have to
Okay.
have you have to
So
be
you
able
can
to
get
you have
the
to
Cube
purchase it
2.0,
through
you can
a
get all the different things then, yeah.
yeah, because you have to be able, some of his products you have to go through a practitioner to
Practitioner.
purchase them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So our
yeah.
general stuff is available direct to the public, but then the hormone line, the EDTA, the IMD, Q 2.0, and the Lyme remedies, those are pro only.
Mhm. And so super important too to make sure you have your hormones optimized prior to starting these things, because like you said, this has a lot to do with our detoxification
Yep.
capabilities. Is how
Yep.
that's great to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Infrared sauna, just one little.
Awesome.
Okay.
And how I, with those, the push catch, you'll see that term a lot. And that's, you take all the liposomes, they move everything around, they get to the liver, they come out, and a half hour later, after you take the liposomes, you take the binder. So it's the push, and then the binder's the catch. So you got a half hour in between there, and it can be long, it can be 45 minutes if you want. What are you going to do in between? Do something therapeutic. And so I do push sauna catch. I got an infrared sauna next to my bed, my bedroom, and take all that stuff, pop in there in the morning, and then do my binder, and I'm good to go. And that is a great combination there.
Ooh, that's good. I just got one. So I'm to go with this. So I'm going to be like
There you
documenting my whole process of Quicksilver and my
go.
sauna and see what happens.
What sauna
And
did you get?
I got the sunlight.
The sunlight. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, the clear light and the sunlight are the two that are
are the
out there.
best. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
they're both
Yeah,
great.
I'm excited because I don't sweat, so I think that that's part of my issue. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get the sauna,
Oh
sweat,
yeah,
teach my
yeah,
body to sweat.
yeah.
And I'm going to start with the advanced push catch, and then I've got the EDTA and the IMD. So I'm going to, and then so add that in afterwards, after I do the push catch.
No, no, no. You're going to add it into the
Oh,
advanced push catch. We're going to layer it on
oh,
top.
oh, okay, okay.
So
I'm
you're
going to layer it
taking
on
the
top.
generalist detox, and then you're making it more metal tuned by adding IMD and ADTA. So every time you take your liposomes, you're going to add in some EDTA. And then when you take your binder, you're going to add 1 or 2 scoops of IMD in with the binder that's in there.
Okay, got it. And you're
And
good. So much of your
all
stuff is
together.
liposomal, which is it acts differently in the system and is much more absorbable, correct?
Yeah, all these things are liposomes or nanoemulsions. They go
Hmm.
right through the oral cavity into circulation, and what you swallow goes right into circulation. 2 minutes you can measure the stuff in the blood. So that's the
Wow.
beauty. All the different things come in at once. When you're taking all these capsules, one thing absorbs in 1 to 2 hours, one thing takes 5 hours, one takes 6. They're all coming to bear on the problem at different times. I want all
Hmm.
my stuff to hit at once, turn over that machinery, spit out some toxins, get the binder, and end the process. And just ties it up in a little bow. So push, half hour later, bind, half hour after that. You can eat if you're going to eat, or you just keep fasting. And you do that process once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day. You got half dose, full dose, double dose. I have people do triple dose. It's just, and you'll see at these higher doses, it's not like you feel worse, you actually feel better. There's a lot of these things are AMPK activators, which stimulate your metabolism. They stimulate autophagy. They stimulate, formation of ketones. They give you more insulin sensitivity. So this is going to change your blood sugar total. I mean, we've taken people, fatty liver and metabolic disease, put them on a whole mercury detox, and all that's gone
I know.
because
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
compounds we're using work on both.
Yeah. And I interviewed Joe Pizzorno, and he was saying that it can cause, like, heavy metals can actually cause insulin resistance,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they can. The
which is,
insulin
yeah.
receptors are dithiols, and so is insulin. So the metals tend to oxidize the receptors and make them not work.
Wow. That's why. Okay. And they can even act, aren't like lead specifically, I think can act like a xenoestrogen almost, like, and dock in on the estrogen receptor
Yeah,
or
lead
block them.
and cadmium.
Lead and cadmium can block the hormone receptors. Okay. Yeah. I think it's one of the biggest driving factors with hormone dysfunction is heavy metals.
That's a big one. I've got to look into it more because
I want
my
you to look into it more.
speculation is that the metals interact with the enzymes that are going through the whole hormone cascade.
Okay.
Cholesterol becomes pregnenolone and progesterone, glucocorticosteroids, or sex hormones. There's so many little transformations, and I think that the metals get in the way of some of these. So you'll build up one enzyme, and you don't have. I mean, one hormone will be real high, and the one it's supposed to transform into will be real low. So that's my speculation. And
Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
and of course, with the xenoestrogens, it's how it modifies the receptor sites and screws up the receptors.
Well, even like there's some information coming out about polycystic ovarian syndrome being caused by all the toxins and the xenoestrogens and heavy metals and stuff that are
Oh,
in our environment. And then in the ovary, testosterone converts through one of those enzymes to our estrogen. And that's how we get estrogen. We get all of our estrogen through the testosterone in the ovaries, right?
aromatase makes it
From
in.
aromatization. And that there's a block, like that aromatization isn't
Oh, and
happening
so
as
you end up
well.
with too much,
Too much
too
testosterone.
much testosterone, not enough
Because
estrogen. Yeah.
there's the estrogen's low, the brain's getting told to
Yeah,
make
because I
more
know.
testosterone, to make more estrogen, and that enzyme's
uh,
not happening correctly. And that's one of the reasons there's PCOS on the rise.
Wow, aromatase block in the. I have
Yes,
to look
in the
that up.
ovaries.
That's great.
So there you go. Yeah. Anyways, I will, respect your time here because I know we're probably over time, but I appreciate all this conversation. It's
Yeah,
been
that
a
was a
pleasure
lot.
talking to you. Yeah, it was
We
good.
really
It was
dove into
great.
things there.
We did. I appreciate it. I'll have to have you back on again because I'm sure we can keep talking. So
There's always
thank you
more to
very
talk
much. And I look
about.
forward to trying Quicksilver.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks,
All right,
Chris.
we'll be in touch. Take care, Karen.
Okay, bye.